Today we're talking to Dinu Šmitu, REFA and Vice Chairman of Supervisory Council. We'll be discussing digitization in medicine, the role of AI, does ChatGPT have any effect, and what is the role of scale in providing medical services. So I wanted to discuss kind of a bunch of topics today and approach medicine from the perspective of a business on one side, and then from a perspective of Latvia and local medical businesses being part of the, at least European market. And also digitization influencing how we provide medical services, right? And then, as a warm-up topic, I wanted to start with the concept of self-care, the availability of devices that measure people more and more, the need for self-care that we've met so much during COVID times, the push for remote medicine that, COVID again and then, epidemics created. How do you see, the real impact on your industry, on your company, beyond the headlines that we read in the news?
I mean, the question about self-care, it's has many facets. I think if conceptually we like it, and I think I personally like it. I'm also a medical doctor by education, and I'm also a professor in university, so looking at public health. So self-care, gadgets, self-measurements means that people are interested in their own health. Yeah? They do something about it. Right, wrong, productive, non-productive, clever, stupid, doesn't matter. It is important they are conscious that they need to look after their health. And I think that is good, because if it's so, if they're still interested, then something can be done about that. The ones who are not interested, they are, one would say, lost to that approach. So in general, yes. The other side of the coin, obviously, is it all the activities beneficial? Okay. Probably the key question is, do we not sometimes try to substitute sort of irrelevant or non-productive or non-beneficial activities, do something, exchange them for some other things? In other words, we don't do things that we should do because we say, I measured this and that and did this and that and I'm fine. Yeah? But generally, that's a good thing. People are more conscious about their health.
And what happened with remote care? I mean, legislation-wise, can we now provide telemedicine? Which parts of the telemedicine can be telemedicated? You
mean Europe, world, Latvia? I think geography is important.
I think, Latvia would be, Baltics would be kind of first question. And then most probably European Union is also pushing certain legislation. Yep. So that would be really interesting to understand. So there are there's a number of domains, obviously. Yeah, number one, medical doctor is a free profession. In other words, by law, they're entitled to make their own judgment by their profession what is best for their patients. Yeah, and that sort of opens up their opportunities and sort of what they legally are allowed to do. If you look at pure law, then law currently is contradictory. There are some parts of law that says that basically has an abstract. That telemedicine is also sort of a way how to practice medicine. Another law says that a treatment episode is only an episode of presence. In other words, people are present. Doctors, patients are physically present. So, and I probably will not go in more detail, but there are things just to be cleaned out, and obviously elaborate much more. Key questions are accountability. If there was a remote, is the accountability on the same level as in the event of presence? So who's responsible? Doctor, patient, technology, enterprise, and so on. And number two question is who and how pays? Because business is important in order to drive that forward. And are there examples now in the Baltics when companies actively push for this type of a service? Is it a thing today?
Yeah, I think there are two types of companies in general that we look, and both have their place, and I think that but that placement is still going to be worked out. One is complete service companies. In other words,
I, as a company, am a platform that enables to do this type of service. Yeah? The simplest one, Zoom, which is not really equipped for medical service, sometimes used though. Yeah, they are not a medical company. They do not provide medical service. They provide a platform for communication and some others. Most apps are like that. And then there is a medical establishment, a certified clinic. Yeah, that is together with their other services they're also doing online or remote.
And what would Zoom miss to be a good platform for medical connection between a patient and the doctor?
One thing is, I think, security standard. Security protocol of data transfer. That's on how to say, on technical side.
Yes.
However, it goes deeper. So why we do that, and what type of problem are we actually solving? Yeah, and I think it's important to know. So when we look at medical technology in general, and by technology, understanding that technology is a visit to a GP, technology is using a machine, technology is prescribing medicines, doing lab tests, whatever we do to get a person better. I think we need to recognize that the actual problem that we're solving with this is that demand and expectation of customers, patients, clients is growing. Yeah, because of age, chronic disease, expectation for better service, all those things. And supply is not catching up. And actually
the gap widens.
It is getting wider, and it will get wider. WHO says in 2030, worldwide, there are going to be an acute necessity for 10 million more doctors, which is not going to be there. And then there are the obvious consequences. And the consequences are our contact time with medical profession is becoming shorter. Now the standard time is 15 minutes for a visit. Out of those 15 minutes, 13 minutes are spent on everything else except actual contact with patient. It's only 2 minutes out of 15. And that is a problem, because, I mean, we as a person arrive with a complex thing usually. We are frustrated, we don't remember things. And then we get largely 2 minutes of full attention out of the visit, and that is a problem that we're solving, and that's where technology comes in.
And does technology solve that problem, or typing in everything is longer actually than writing it with your beautiful medical handwriting?
Yeah. As with many things, devil's in the detail.
Yes, that's why I'm asking. Yes.
Yeah, we understand that. So. My own view is the current state of affair is that on top of all the other things that does not allow us to actually provide meaningful service to patients, is that computer screen has come between a doctor and the patient. In other words, instead of, in many, not all cases, but in many cases actually to making it more efficient, making it more meaningful, this contact, it actually takes away time. Yeah, and part of it is part of the problem, and there are many reasons for that. We can cover some of those, and that is a problem we're solving. Very simple example: in Latvia, medical documentation legislation requires do both electronic and paper, which by definition says you had paper before. Seriously, now on top of that, you have to do electronic. There is now, you are not allowed to do patient records without paper. You are supposed, and you have to keep those for 75 years. So that's, by definition, is inefficiency, if you say. And but there are reasons for that, because unless you can guarantee that electronic will work and will be kept and blah blah blah, then you have to keep paper.
If we talk about the shortage of personnel, so you said 10 million, this is globally, right?
That is global.
Yes, and I guess we see the same challenge in Europe. You know, NHS was in the news in the last several weeks and months, and in Latvia the problems were pretty severe. So is this market nowadays European, or the market is localized? So if you get a Latvian diploma, how many people with Latvian diplomas, you know, move away and work?
Many.
Yeah, it's proportion-wise, is it like half or?
It depends. It is a significant amount. I would say. It impacts Latvian healthcare industry, and one is doctors, the other one is nurses, but probably it's
both are important.
It's even more burning. So in EU, it's a regulated industry, really very regulated, but it's regulated on the EU level. So basically, you get a diploma of RSU, you go into residency any place in EU or EEA actually, and you work anywhere you want.
Okay, and then what countries like the Baltics can then do to solve this problem?
One thing, healthcare is for probably largely emotional reasons. It is a pretty localized industry. We need to remember that healthcare is not part of completely unified European sort of setting. And we slightly mentioned people who live in other places often tend to come back for their checkups, for their health needs, because of largely emotional reasons. That is not always rational, because they have to trust their doctor, they have to speak the language, they need to be culturally sort of engaged and so on. And therefore, that is helping us big time. But at the same time, I think we need to recognize that I think there are two ways to go. One is sort of try and find admin ways how to keep people in. Like, we paid for your education, you have to do some slave work for 3, 5, whatever type of years. You do this and that and so, but I don't think it's going to work. I think we need to change that around and probably try and look if we can export, not people, but services as much as it is possible. Because one, it will keep people here and provide resource for our own patients, but also it will provide actually real money back into the industry. Yeah, or everything that sort of gets back, and medical export of medical services obviously is a very good source of income.
I double-clicked on economic productivity and education. This kind of is very similar, right? You need to have a good professor. You need to pay for a good professor. And what I understood is that, for example, if you compare it with the UK, then in the UK, the ratio between a professor and the number of students is like 10 to 100 times larger, because the scale of the institutions in the UK is larger, right? For example, University of Edinburgh is 40,000 students, which is probably not larger than all of the Baltic universities, but like in that vicinity. So economic productivity in medicine, because paying doctors more is not only about charging more, but it's also about making doctors more productive. So is it a topic, or it's not as simple in medicine?
I think it is a topic. We have a very frank discussion, and I mostly worked in, although I'm, as I said, a medical doctor, I mostly worked in managerial positions of various kinds. There is a constant intrinsic conflict and clash between doctors and managers.
Yes,
I'm not saying it's topic, yes. I'm not saying it's always, a bad thing, because one part, and I'm simplifying a little bit, think, well, we are doing the real work, we are treating people, and all those managers, they're waste. That's an exaggeration.
One approach,
The other thing, the other part thinks, okay, your doctors, you're between craft and art, and if you would be more productive, more efficient, less talking, more doing, more structured, more algorithms, you would actually do better. And that is sort of a constant sort of balance. But in general, yes, I think there is I would say room for much bigger efficiency. In order to get that, the question would always be where. Yeah, because having a title is one thing. Finding exact places where exactly that efficiency lies. Yeah, what exactly do we need? We need data. We need data. We need to analyze them, and we need to make decisions based on that data. Yeah. So we like that. We don't have that data. Yeah, and this is where e-health and things like that come in.
And maybe if we talk about that a little bit more. So when we talk about Latvian healthcare systems, or in general government or state healthcare systems, typically the discussion is about registering a patient, writing off a prescription, this stuff. But the value of the system is only starting when you have registered all of the data and you actually start analyzing the data, when you start helping doctors with diagnosis, which means that you need to have a lot of data, which sometimes means that you potentially need to use, European data to help a Latvian patient, and then all of those data systems are disjoint, etc. So what is the reality in the ground, in our region in the Baltics? In that area that we start, actively using artificial intelligence, are our hospitals trying to get connected to, let's say, artificial intelligence systems of Google or Microsoft or specialized artificial intelligence systems?
Look, I think you asked a wonderful question.
Thank you.
And I think trying to answer that question has taken us a very long time. And instead of taking, it's like when you want to dig a very big hole in the ground, you need an excavator. Yeah, but then, the excavator takes 2 years to produce. And the question is, what do you do until then? Do you just sit and wait for 2 years and then it's sort of, we discover that the excavator is not coming or something else has changed? Or you take small spades and start digging while waiting. And I think, conceptually looking at it, okay, let's do the whole e-system and only then start sort of feeding data in. I think, my personal view, I think it has been a wrong approach. Let's start in areas where we can do that. It does not sort of, by doing that, we do not take away responsibility and activity of actually setting up the system, like using the classificators, the coding systems, and putting it all together, and then starting using it once they're ready. But let's do things that we can do. Yeah, now, and let's not try to make one big system. UK is a good example. First e-health system they tried to fail big time because they wanted to make a universal. And while you do it, the world has changed. Yeah. So,
do we have examples of somebody doing this in the Baltics?
Sometimes we use Estonia as an example. I'm actually not that sure if it's. I think example that we can use is about approach and sort of governance, how they do that, not the actual system itself. If you look at electronic systems, there are certain data that you need to collect. The personal data of patients, their diagnosis, their health state, what happened to them, all the events along their path, everything happens. And what we need to do, we need to collect that in a sort of a readable, or let's say way which is a standardized way. There's many systems in the world that offer that. The most probably often used is HL7. It's a technical term, which basically says, okay, if you write my name, you write it in this format in that place. If you write the diagnosis, you do it here, events here, and so on. And then whichever system you use to actually input data or get it out of the system, it understands which information to get from where, and then you can start use analytics, you can start to use AI and things like that. And that's the basic which has not been done. If you go to a hospital and they put together a medical record, it's a plain document. One hospital would write it like this, another one like this. It's all information in there, but it's not reproducible. It cannot be used sort of like in a machine readable or a machine analytical way. And for that we need the standards exist. They need to be written down. There are specifics which we need to sort of account for here. And I think that's part of the plan in sort of the new e-health sort of service system. I hope so.
And talking about machines, like 30, 40 years ago, a General Electric machine was just a machine. You install it, you make a röntgen, and then you use it. So today it's all digital. They're trying to put services on top of the machine. What they could potentially do with the same picture, but in digital format, is much more than just machine can do. So do you see your relationship as a hospital changing with your equipment providers? Does it create a new value chain?
I think with all, and I apologize that I generalize a little bit.
Yeah.
I think there are two things to mention. One, industry is a big driver of innovation, and that is good because they have a good motivation.
Yeah.
Profit and growth relies on that, and that's a very good motivator. And we need to incentivize that. Also, the change in efficiency in hospitals, there's no incentive, and say the same for them. Two real good sort of questions to answer are the following. One, does that innovation gives a meaningful clinical effect at the end? Can we treat patients better, faster, safer, follow them up, and so on, because we use the technology? Yeah, sometimes technology is like our phones. Yeah, I personally probably use 1% of whatever my phone can do. The other thing is interchangeability. Yeah, and I think it's one, the charger wires in EU phones. Same should be in that industry. You take a Siemens machine and change it for a G machine. Your data shouldn't disappear, or you shouldn't give a huge type of hassle in order to interpret and analyze and so on. They need to be switch on, switch off, so that you can have that progressive type of competition. Yeah, which is you compete on your actual service, on the quality of your service, and so, but not on. You are stuck with this machine because all your data now are formatted like in one or the other way. I know. I hope it was clear.
Yeah, it's absolutely clear, right? I mean, if you talk about innovation, so there are of course GE and Siemens, etc. So, do you see innovation or good changes coming from the Nordic Baltic innovation ecosystem?
There are a number of companies that try to do things. I think the question is always how to say. There are certain innovations where scale and it's like in chip industry. You need to have a certain economics behind that. But then there are certain innovations that we can do. I think that there are two things necessary. Well, a number of things necessary. One is how to finance the sort of the part of development when you do not know what happens. Like DARPA in US finances military. Yeah, it's how to close that gap, between crazy professor or young guys, innovators, when they need to grow up, if you like, with their product. That's number one. Number two, are there real incentives inside the system? Like healthcare system, the end customer, who would say, okay, you develop this system, we would, in our payment terms, we would include that this innovation can live. Yeah. In other words, if I now, as a medical business, use a system which is more convenient for patients, that gathers data and so on, I'm not incentivized. It's my willingness to do so. To create a system that would actually incentivize a meaningful outcome now or in the future. And I think if those conditions are there, I think there's a lot of, probably you know more than me, but I think there are a lot of interesting things. And many of them are basic, like adherence to treatment. Key, really, really big issue everywhere.
Alzheimer's.
Adherence to treatment.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, you go to a doctor, you do the lab tests, you spend money, you invest time, you have a sickness you want to heal, you get all the advice, everything, and you do about 30-40% of what you were advised. Yeah? And you expect a good result. Yeah?
You mentioned scale. So what is the role of scale in the profession? So on one side, there are always specialized institutions. On the other side, when big cases happen, people get sent to Charité because Charité is big and it's a institute.
Most of the cases in medicine, and it is good that it is like that, can be solved at general practitioner level, at family doctor level, and that is very good. And I hope the more investment will go towards that, because most of the cases can be solved. The issue are, as you said, specific cases, which in smaller places cannot be scalable, just because we do not get cases enough. And here, actually, if I have still time, I can tell a very little story.
Yeah.
We all know the how to say, old, experienced, good doctor. We come into their office, they have a look at us, they ask 2 questions, it takes about 2 seconds, and they know what's going on with us. Yeah, and sometimes we think it's a miracle, but it's not a miracle. It's long years of experience when you immediately, you can, by the way we walk, by the way we talk, the way how we describe our symptoms, the way we look, and so on. That doctor, with other obviously information, they can make a fast diagnosis. And this is where AI comes in, because the problem is you need years and years and years of practice in order to get there. But then you're a young doctor, 5 years experience, you cannot be there. Yeah, you need that colleague. And one thing is having available those more clever people, either it's Mayo Clinic or it's another, or Charité or University Hospital in Riga for people living in another town. How can you consult quickly without the hassle of transportation and so on, sort of use their knowledge, which you will never get in your place just because of scale. The other thing is AI, which in theory could learn from those experienced doctors and put together in a database all those little signs one by one, and then advise the younger doctor. Probably not to make a decision on their behalf, but say, why won't you think about this one? Because based on that experience with those statistics and with those outcomes. But that's a long way to go, I think.
It's a pretty long way.
Definitely a way to go, I think. Have an advising system.
I mean, ChatGPT was on the agenda. Everybody's talking about it for the last 4 weeks. What's the discussion in the medical profession?
Well, in terms of technology, I'm afraid, again, with exceptions, obviously, I think it is the most conservative profession in the world. Remember banking in early 90s. It's where we are.
And maybe last question. So if we kind of compare today's healthcare system, it was more or less created in the beginning of the 20th century. Healthcare was made available for everybody. Then antibiotics came in. Then there are lots of treatments, vaccination. And what I sometimes think about when we discuss those challenges that we face today is that we haven't noticed that a lot of responsibility has moved from the doctors back to the patient, because some things may happen in life, but then doctors often have treatment, and then the best thing that you can do is do as much preventive care, etc. What is the perspective from the medical profession on this? Should people be more responsible, and in what ways?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one. I have a schizophrenic sort of view on that. As a doctor, how doctors are taught. We know best. There's information asymmetry. We know best. Patients don't do it. They're stupid. Simple as that. Again, don't sort of go for everyone. Real life says patients are more empowered. They want to be more empowered, and they will have to, because of that, remember, demand supply going the other direction than the normal economy. So it will happen anyway, and the question is, what do we do? Do we allow a patient to read, I would say, fake news, Dr. Google, some alternative and things like that? Or we recognizing that, we try to engage them in all different ways, that the choices they make themselves and they empower themselves are correct, as correct as possible. And also probably recognizing that the medical book that I read 30 years ago might not be appropriate my patient that came in, because that person is a personality as well, not only. And there are good stories, by the way, in sometimes, I don't know what's your view on alternative medicine, like homeopathy and things like that. And sometimes, there is an opinion that, that's all rubbish. Alternative medicine is, no proof and so on. But there is one thing that we can learn. And I think, remember the problem of 15 minutes. What sort of normal doctors do. They treat a disease, an organ, a situation, an episode, whatever we call it, it's simplifying a little bit. Yeah. What the healers and alternative medicine does, they say, okay, look, you're a person. I'm not looking at your leg or your arm or your head or whatever. I'm looking at you as a whole. Yeah, you're a personality, you will feel better. And I think that is what we're missing. And I think we're also technology. That's a promise from the technology, that when we have all the data accumulated, when we can analyze and make decisions on that, or assist doctors with those decisions, I think then it should help us to do that. That's the biggest promise. We take away, you know, all the admin and papers and our own, you know, prejudices and old sort of learnings and whatever it is. We use that data in order actually to see the patient's well-being, patient's health. That's the biggest promise. If it's just another gadget in our room,
that's probably the best ending we could have for this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.